Hey, good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. I am your host, Vin Diesel, and I'm here to talk to you about family. Okay, we're not going to talk about family. We're going to talk about Marvel. We're going to talk about Black Widow, which was all about family. So a little bit we're going to talk about family. So that was probably a little closer than I thought. We're going to talk about Loki because I wasn't able to... I wasn't here to do shows last week. I am Groot. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Bad Batch because we had an interesting episode of the Bad Batch that I feel needs to be discussed. So there's probably going to be a lot of spoilers today. So I don't know if Kyle's up for hitting a spoiler thing, but... I shouldn't have even questioned it. Kyle, even injured and recovering, he's quick to hit that spoiler button for me, and I appreciate that. All right, we're going to start off with, well, before we get into that, I should mention the big news for Marvel today is that WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier came away with 28 Emmy nominations. 28. That's a lot. 23 of them were for WandaVision. Now, a lot of them were for behind-the-scenes stuff, music, technical, costumes, just down the line. I mean, they're all the really good stuff. And then Falcon and Winter Soldier, they're 5. A lot of it was stunt coordination, things like that. But Elizabeth Olsen, nominated for Best Lead Actress in a limited series or anthology series. Paul Bettany for Best Lead Actor. Kathryn Hahn for Best Guest Actress or Star. I don't remember if it's gender specific on that one. And Don Cheadle got a nod for Best Guest Actor in a series. Now, they put them in different ways. They made WandaVision... they put WandaVision in as a limited series anthology, and they put Falcon the Winter Soldier as just a series. Therefore, they weren't competing against each other. I'm a little surprised that Anthony Mackie didn't get a nod for Best Lead Actor, and I'm a little surprised that Carl Lumbly didn't get a nod for Best Guest Appearance or whatever, the same thing that Don Cheadle did. Because as much as I liked Cheadle's performance and I thought it was good, I think Carl Lumbly's was a little more impactful, and I would be fine with both of them getting nominated, but I think Lumbly was probably a little bit above Cheadle. But I'm not part of the Emmy nomination process, so my opinion doesn't really matter. That's just the way it works, I guess. All right. So at least we have some reason to watch the Emmy Awards for the first time in a long time. All right. We're going to move on to the Bad Batch. Now, I have been hit or miss with this series. And we talked about this on Popco the Writers on Sunday, Paul and I. And Paul basically said that he thought my expectations for the series were set improperly. Now, for me, being that it was coming into the same time slot, or the same slot, basically, just the release point as The Mandalorian, as WandaVision, and as Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I expected the Bad Batch would be more of an event series, that it would be something like the other 3 series, that, it's going to be a tight 6, 8, 9 episodes, and it was going to be moving the story forward constantly. And instead what we got is this bridge between Clone Wars and Rebels. It's basically season 8 or 9 of Clone Wars. And most people, from what I understand, are perfectly fine with that. They're happy with that, and that's what they wanted. And I look at that series and I see some really good episodes, some good storytelling, and then I see a lot of filler, a lot of episodes that didn't need to happen to tell the story of the Bad Batch. This last episode being a perfect example of that. The whole episode, the entire episode, focused not on the Bad Batch. They only showed up for the equivalent of 2 minutes in the episode. It focused on the Twi'leks that we had met in Clone Wars, the leader of the Twi'lek Rebellion, and his daughter, Hera Syndulla, I believe that's the name, who is a major character on the series Rebels. Now, all of these series are Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni does all of them. I mean, that's his thing. But did we need an entire episode origin story for Hera? We already got to see Kanan in the premiere, in the pilot thing. Now we're getting a whole episode dedicated to Hera that takes us completely away from the Bad Batch. The only member of the Bad Batch we get on any regular or any amount is Crosshair, who is now technically a bad guy. He's still with the Galactic Empire. So, but that was only part one of the two problems I saw. Star Wars has this thing, and I equated it to Dave Filoni, and Paul pointed out that he thinks it's pretty much just the Star Wars storytelling format, which is a young character thrust into a war with special abilities, and we follow them as they grow up and they deal with all this stuff. It's the story of Luke Skywalker. It's the story of Anakin Skywalker. It's the story of Rey. It's the story of Grogu. It's the story of Ezra in Rebels. It's the story of Ahsoka Tano in Clone Wars. Well, that's pretty much what we got in this single episode. It was Hera was the one. So it was like an incorporation of the stories they keep doing over and over again. And just did it in a 28-minute episode focused on Hera. At least set her up to be that character in Rebels. I mean, they didn't, well, I guess they kind of did that with Solo, and they kind of did that with, yeah, I mean, that's the young person growing up in the middle of a war. Yeah. I guess I hadn't actually looked at it too closely, but where Luke was at least somewhat old enough to go off and join the rebellion, and Han, when he did it, he didn't have any special powers. He could, stuff like that. Oh yeah, Mando got some big Emmy nominations. The Boys also got some really big Emmy nominations. They're the other one, the Hollywood Critics Awards. But hello, Blue Maker. So yeah, that's my thing with the Bad Batch. And the Bad Batch, of course, is doing this whole thing with Omega. And yes, I will say Omega because that's how they say it in the show, and it's really annoying. But so yeah, I'm not loving the Bad Batch. I like it. I like some of the episodes that are really good. Blue Maker, we are talking right now about Star Wars: The Bad Batch. We're then going to talk about Black Widow and Loki in that order. So yeah, that's my big issue with The Bad Batch, is that it feels like Dave Filoni is a one-trick pony, that he's constantly putting the young hero, and he gets them younger and younger. I mean, Ahsoka Tano was kind of a teen. Now Omega looks like she's, what, 9 or 10. Grogu, well, Grogu's 50, but yeah, we get that he's young for his race. But it does feel like he's doing the same story over and over again. So, and I know I'm alone in this. I know a lot of people love Dave Filoni and what he's doing, but I'd like to see him do a different story. I'd like to see Star Wars do a different story. Tell us the story of somebody else, somebody, just a different story than, the same repeated thing that George Lucas started with. We don't need to do the same thing over and over again. Tell us something different. I think that's the big plus to the Marvel Universe, is it's not the same story. They don't even do the same genre. We get a spy thriller, then we get a science fiction movie, then we get a war film, and then we get, it's just each film, a heist. I mean, each film seems to kind of take on its own genre. So I'd like to see Star Wars start doing that. I'd like to see Bad Batch start doing that. Mandalorian felt a little different in that the lone wolf and cub, Grogu isn't really the star, Mando is. But in these other shows, it feels like everything hinges around the kid, the young character, where I can see Mando being perfectly fine for season 3 without Grogu. We could tell the story of Mando and Bo-Katan dealing with the Darksaber and getting their planet back, and I think that's fine. But yeah, I was hoping that the Bad Batch would be somewhat of a standalone thing, that you could get in and enjoy these characters and stuff. But there's so many other characters thrown in, and yeah, Mando started doing that too, but he didn't start doing it until season 2, really, where we're still in halfway through the first season, and we're getting all these different characters from Clone Wars and Rebels, and and even from Mandalorian. So that is my problem with the Bad Batch. So, gonna move on. I think that's enough complaining about the Bad Batch. There's still 5 episodes left. I think that was number 11. I'm hoping we get some good story stuff moving forward, but we'll go from there. Moving on to Black Widow. Now, I had just gotten back from vacation, had just driven from Central California down to Southern California, dealt with a bunch of Friday traffic, got in the room, we laid down, turned on Disney Plus, and I bought Black Widow. And I'm kind of mixed on it. I really enjoyed the action. I enjoyed the family element. I liked David Harbour as Red Guardian so much more than I ever expected. He came across in the trailers like he was going to be this big goofy guy and kind of a joke. And while he was a little bit of a joke, he was a lot stronger than I expected too. He had, the connection. I saw a video interview with the cast, and they were talking about, and again, we're doing spoilers, so just in case. There's a point in the movie where he sings, and it wasn't in the initial script. Kevin Feige said he got a call one day, and it was from one of the executive producers going, David wants to sing. And Kevin's like, wait, what? David wants to sing to Florence Pugh. And Kevin's response was, are we going to make the day with it? And the guy said, yeah. He says, all right, let's do it. Worst case scenario, we just cut it. And what he sings is American Pie, which then they put in to the beginning of the film so that there's a callback, and that becomes this huge important thing in the film. Well, that's something that David Harbour brought to it. That wasn't something the writers had mixed in. That wasn't that was David Harbour's idea. And I got the feeling that the family aspect, they let these actors really embrace their characters. There were times they got together to sit and talk out what their characters were going to do in the scenes, like when they're sitting around the kitchen table or when they're interacting with the other members of the family. And they were able to change dialogues and things like that. And I think that made the movie better. I think the family dynamic was one of the best parts. I think I would watch a Red Guardian movie in a heartbeat. There's the point where he's talking about how he fought Captain America in the 80s and the big Ursa guy. And yeah, that was probably a nod to Ursa Major from the Soviet Super Soldiers or Winter Guard or whatever they're calling the team this week. But he says, well, that's impossible. Captain America didn't wake up until later. He was still in the ice in the 80s. And, you know, what if there was a different Captain America? Wouldn't that be a great movie or a Disney Plus series following the Red Guardian? I would absolutely be watching that. Yeah. So that I liked. There were some huge plot holes that don't make sense to me. And I think the villains were an absolute waste. Ray Winstone was so one note that he didn't even sound Russian through most of it. He sounded just like a British mob boss, you know? The type of thing you'd see in a, what's his name? Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, the guy that did those movies. Guy Ritchie. He seems like the bad guy in a Guy Ritchie film. He didn't seem like a Russian super spy or, you know, the head of the Red Room. Taskmaster, who I think is one of the coolest villains Marvel has, total waste. The reveal, they didn't really give us any reason to care. You know, they showed us who it was, and we all went, oh, okay. And if it's supposed to be some kind of redemption thing for Natasha, I don't think it redeems her. In that case, I mean, I think her sacrificing herself in Infinity War or Endgame, I think all this other stuff she's done, helping people, that redeems her. But the fact that she didn't actually kill the little girl that she used to try to find her target in Budapest, that doesn't redeem her because she was willing to sacrifice an innocent little girl just to find her target in Budapest. Do you think because he waited so long and knew so much about the movie hurt the movie? No, I don't. Because I can go and watch a movie for an adaptation of a book I've already seen and still judge it based on its own merit. You know, do I think it would have played differently a year earlier? Not necessarily. Because I still think that the flaws in it are not time-based, but, you know, it might have been helped had it come out after Civil War, before Infinity War, where we didn't know. I mean, if it came out where it was supposed to take place, that might have made a difference because Natasha, excuse me, we wouldn't know that Natasha is going to die later on, so she has to live through this movie. But other than that, I don't see. Oh, there's more. Let's see. But for instance, there was so much build-up for Taskmaster, there was no way it could live up to the hype. Now, see, I disagree. I do disagree with you on that. Because I think if a character is well written, then it would have lived up to the hype. The Taskmaster action was great. The readouts in the screen, that was good. That's not where the problem was. The problem was they spent no time giving any credence to the character. They really seemed to think that just the reveal was enough. And instead, the reveal kind of weakened him, because then it also leaves questions like, when you look at the character, he's big, he's bulky, and then all of a sudden they open the mask and it's a woman. Why is he big and bulky then? Why is her armor that big? When they took off the helmet, she looked like the tiny little head on a body, like it was badly drawn, like a badly drawn comic. It didn't look like it made sense. And if there was an explanation why the suit was so big, or if they had given us any scenes between Dreykov and Taskmaster before, where we see some kind of connection and we see kind of a familiar bond, or maybe if Dreykov actually cared about his daughter and didn't just use her as a tool, then maybe those things would have been good. But it didn't. It wasn't the fact. I don't think it was the hype, because I think the action scenes were terrific. And that's really what you think about Taskmaster. But the character in the comics has this rich history. It's kind of like the Mandarin switch. It's like, well, why did you do that? Whose expectations were you subverting? Because we never got a reason to think that Taskmaster was anybody. They didn't give us enough to say, oh, it might have been Milena. It could have been Mason. It could have been somebody. No, there was never a point in the movie that we thought Taskmaster was somebody. So the reveal that it was somebody else, it didn't matter at that point who Taskmaster was. They could have gone the whole movie and never showed us who he was, and then saved him for another movie and just made him a badass, and just focused on Dreykov. But they didn't develop either character with any depth. Dreykov was one-dimensional and Taskmaster had nothing. And then they revealed that it was the daughter, and it's like, and do I care? They could have spent a couple of minutes with Dreykov dealing with his daughter out of her armor, where we see that she lived but is in bad condition and whatnot, and we think she's in a wheelchair or bedridden, and then we find out later that she can get up with the help of the armor. That's why it's so big. All of that could have been done, but they didn't. They didn't bother giving us any depth and expected the reveal to pay off something, and it wasn't there. So I definitely have a big problem with that. Now, they did refer to it as the Taskmaster Protocol, which means that maybe there's others. Maybe we'll get a different Taskmaster. I don't know. But it just seems like a waste of a very popular villain in the Marvel comics, in the same way they wasted Mandarin. Now they're trying to make up for the Mandarin with Shang-Chi. And again, Dreykov, he put in something that if they smell him, they can't fight him. Aren't these girls all like trained assassins that use sniper rifles? Couldn't they have just shot him from a distance? Yeah, the same way they wasted Claw in Black Panther. Yes, Marvel is not good with villains. They have a handful of good villains. Killmonger, Loki, Thanos, Hela. They're getting better with the villains as they progress, but the problem is that most of the time they treat the villains just like, well, we got to have them fight somebody, so let's throw it in. And especially if, on a movie like this, Natasha is so established that they didn't need to spend a lot of time with her. We got the whole episodes of The Americans as the opening. They needed to spend some time or insert it. Maybe there should have been a son. Maybe that would have been it. Maybe had there been an older brother that they were raised with and he became Taskmaster. They thought he was killed or he didn't make it on the plane, or something. They could have done that and then made him Taskmaster. Absolutely would have been a lot more of a payoff than, we all forgot. I mean, I think a lot of people forgot anything about Draco's daughter by the ending. And then suddenly the reveal, and it's like, oh, okay. Her head looks tiny. That was pretty much the reaction for me. And there were other problems with it. There's the whole thing at the end where the whole flying city the flying Red Room nobody ever noticed, comes crashing down, and Ross is showing up with his troops, and Natasha's like, to me, it's Kevin Costner from Man of Steel. She's standing there going, "No, I have to stay." It's like, why do you have to stay? Get on the helicopter with the other Black Widows and go away. Ross can look and see what happened. You can send him a note. Why do you have to stay and give yourself up? But if she's going to stay and give herself up, what happens? They don't show us that. Instead, we cut to 2 weeks later. She now has short blonde hair. She's wearing her sister's vest, and she's about to get on a Quinjet that Mason suddenly got out of nowhere and to fly off. And we have no resolution of what happened with Ross. It's this completely ridiculous thing that it's like, well, why did any of that happen? What was the purpose of having Ross show up if we're not going to see that scene? What was that for? So again, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm really negative on the film, because there are parts of it I absolutely love. There are parts, again, every moment David Harbour's on screen was awesome. I thought Rachel Weisz was really good, though it feels like there's more to that character. And the numbers for the box office were pretty amazing for basically coming out of the pandemic. It split between Disney Plus and the theaters. It did 80 million in the theaters, another 70 something overseas, and 60 million on Disney Plus. Now, which sounds huge, but if you think about it, at $30 a pop, that means just 2 million people signed up for it, or 2 million purchases. So that doesn't sound as big when you're looking at a big movie like that. But it was also the first time Disney Plus ever said, "Hey, this is how much we made on a premium access thing." But 215 million, I think, was the grand total, counting overseas box office. So I think it's considered a hit. For just about any other company, it would be a hit. For Marvel, it's considered to have done really well. It's the third highest grossing origin story after Black Panther and Captain Marvel. So maybe they've got a sequel in mind. Maybe they're going to take the 2 weeks that happened with Ross, and that'll become a sequel. Maybe we'll spend some time with Milena and Red Guardian. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. All right, we're going to pause here for a moment. If Kyle is still with us, we will take this to a quick break, and we'll come back to a little more on Black Panther, and then talk about Loki and the upcoming finale. So back in a minute.
There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com to find a store near you.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We are talking about Black Widow. We are going to be talking about Loki. So let's do that spoiler warning again, just in case anybody just tuned in. All right. So what we're talking about on Black Widow is just some of the plot holes, some of the things that didn't make a lot of sense to me. But again, I think it's a good movie. It's enjoyable. I'm probably going to sit down and watch it again in the next night or two. Most of the people I've been talking to about it have been really positive about it. Lisa, my friend who I went on vacation with, who watched the movie with me when we got back, she liked it but didn't love it and had more problems with it than I did. She didn't think the family aspect really clicked for her. She didn't feel invested in any of it. So maybe the fact that, maybe if you're a fan of the Americans, or you know that this is based on real stuff where the Russian families were, hiding out as sleepers or sleepers in the Midwest. So that's all possible. Maybe that's a connection, or maybe you really had to pay a lot of attention to the MCU and care about Natasha, where she's been kind of a background character in a lot of films. So I could see people just going, okay, why do we care? They shortcutted a lot of it, which is a downside when you start getting 23, 24 movies deep into a franchise, which we've never seen before. I think James Bond is the only one that has that many films. So, yeah, it's kind of a unique thing. So the fact that they're shortcutting these things, something they need to think about. The action sequences, though, were absolutely fantastic. The chase through Budapest, her and Mason disagreeing on how to pronounce Budapest. Budapest. Even the Red Guardian cell breakout and him doing the arm wrestling while getting a tattoo. Those things were all great. Absolutely loved it. The whole sitting around the table family thing was really good, better than I ever expected. I kind of thought that would be the part that I would maybe tune out a little bit because, family drama. But instead, that was some of the highlights of the movie, the interaction between them, how they all kind of reverted back to how they were when they were younger. I thought they did a really good job with de-aging Rachel Weisz and David Harbour just a little to make the age difference plausible from when they lived in Ohio. I thought the two girls they cast as Natasha and Yelena as children were great, one of whom is the daughter of Mila Jovovich and Paul S.W. Anderson. I think her name is Eva Anderson. Not Eva, but it's Ever, E-V-A-R, or something like that. But she's a up-and-coming actress, so I have a feeling we'll see more of her, and I thought she did a great job. So, yeah, most of the film I thought was really good. It's just these lingering issues that really bothered me. So yeah, I was a little disappointed in that. By the way, if you didn't notice, before the movie was released on Disney Plus, they also put out another Marvel Legends video for Black Widow. So you can kind of count on those now, I think, that those are going to drop before any of the new movies come out. The other interesting thing, though, now let's get to the end credit scene before we get over to Loki. It's hard to judge when this is exactly supposed to take place. I'm going to say it's supposed to take place before Falcon and the Winter Soldier, merely because it was supposed to be released before Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We were supposed to meet Contessa Valentina de Allegro, on and on, here first and then in Falcon and Winter Soldier. So I think Yelena's been working for her for a while, and now they've recruited John Walker. I really liked that they're sending her after Hawkeye, because now the stakes for the Hawkeye TV series makes a lot more sense if a Black Widow's going after her or him. And then you also have to wonder who else is going to be involved. I know David Harbour talked in an interview saying that he thinks he should go after Hawkeye, because he probably thinks that the Red Guardian probably thinks that Hawkeye is the reason Natasha's dead, and that's what he would do. I don't know. I don't think we'll get him, but maybe we'll get some of the other Black Widows. I mean, there was a whole helicopter full of them that they saved. There's also Taskmaster, so maybe some of those characters will show up in Hawkeye, which will make it a lot more of an interesting series too. We've got Jeremy Renner. We got, is it Haley Stanfield, who's playing the new Hawkeye. But you got to wonder, why does Val want Hawkeye dead, or want to take out Hawkeye? Is it because of his time as Ronin, or is it because he's an Avenger? Is she trying to eliminate all the Avengers? It's kind of an interesting question, and it'll be neat to see where that goes. And of course, the other line that Val says when talks about her wanting a vacation and a raise, who's Val working for? That's going to be another interesting question. Who's above Val? So I think it was a nice little teaser. That and the little scene with Mason at the end where he gets her a Quinjet, and we see how she's going off to try to piece everything to bed. She's going to go break a few people out of prison and stuff like that. That's interesting. But then who actually did she break out of prison? Cap wasn't in prison. Hawkeye got out, I think, agreeing not to do anything and got to go be with this family. And then, or I don't remember how that did. Scott Lang was under house arrest. So who did she break out? I don't know. Have to think about that. But at least we see why, when she goes blonde, when she gets the vest, because, wardrobe, that's very important to explain. All right, we are going to move on now to Loki. Now, I wasn't here last week, so I wasn't able to do my spoiler discussion. We talked about it some on Pop Go the Writers, but that was the next thing I watched. So I came home and I watched Black Widow, then I watched Loki, and then I watched The Bad Batch, all kind of back to back to back. So Loki, wow. That may be the most Easter eggs I've ever seen jammed into a single Marvel thing, period. We got Frog Thor and Mjolnir. We got the Thanos copter. Okay, right there alone, Thanos copter. We've got the Avengers building bought out by Kang Corporation, Qeng. Kyle says, I rewatched Loki immediately after my surgery while I was still pretty doped up. It didn't help. Yeah, this was one of those episodes, but they were putting in so many Kang references. I mean, we started off with Ravonna Renslayer and a few other things building towards it, but we got Aloth, the smoke creature thing that they were fighting. That is straight out of Kang. That's a creature solidly tied to Kang and only Kang. The Kang Corporation, QENG, that takes over the Avengers Tower, that was run by Nathaniel Richards, a.k.a. Kang. We also get the Sphinx and some of the pyramids, and those end up in Kang's Chronopolis city. It's just one right after another. They're really pushing the idea of Kang. But at the same time, you would have thought they would have introduced the big bad in this episode, so that the last episode would really be just all about the resolution, like they did with WandaVision. You know, we got Agatha all along in the second to last episode, not the last episode. So that makes me think, well, then maybe we've already met the big bad. Maybe Kang is Thanos to Loki's invasion of New York, which is kind of what I've been thinking anyway, that there's going to be a big bad, and then there's going to be the man behind the big bad. And I think that's going to end up being the case. Now, I have a theory. I'll give it to you in a few minutes, but let's continue on with the actual episode. There was a lot of Easter eggs, like I said, but there was also a lot of good story. Richard E. Grant as classic Loki probably, I want to say, stole the show. But the problem is that Alligator Loki was also pretty damn awesome. Yeah. One of my favorite lines is how Loki said he was heartbroken that the idea that there's an Alligator Loki didn't even surprise him. Or that, he wasn't even shocked by it. And it's like, that's such a good line. When he bites the hand of President Loki, and the scream President Loki has was just hilarious. The whole fight, they were dropping more of these urban legends like the Polybus machine, or the big ship that dropped out of the sky and started fighting the Aelith. Well, that is the actual ship from the Philadelphia experiment that was supposed to have either disappeared or time traveled or got a cloaking device. I mean, there was so many different versions of what happened to that ship. It's supposed to be a real ship, or it's a real ship that disappeared. I mean, that's what the urban legend is. So they brought all that in along with the Thanos copter. I got to keep going back to the Thanos copter. But you also see like the head of a statue head of the living tribunal. We see a big version of Yellow Jacket's mask. We see Red Skull's swirling helicopter that he flies away at one point in Captain America: First Avenger. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the void. But there's also Mobius, and that is awesome. He shows up in that little car. The only thing funnier is if he would have showed up in a sports car like his character in the Pixar movie. But he shows up, he picks up Sylvie, and they go to take on Aelith, and she's touched it, so she's knows that there's a castle out there. There's a man behind the cloud, and that's kind of the big gist. There isn't a lot of story driving in this, but they give us a lot of stuff to feed on. So it's interesting that we didn't get to see the man behind the mask, because if they would have showed it to us at the end there, it's, oh, look, it's Kang. Oh, look, it's another Loki variant. Oh, it's Miss Minutes all of a sudden. Any of those things shown in the last second when the clouds moved away, if they had walked into the castle, opened the door, then we could spend this whole last episode figuring that out. But now you've got to introduce the big bad. But, and then also we've got whatever Judge Renslayer's doing with Miss Minutes, how she's talking, they brought up the whole idea of a ship that could travel through the void and all of it was a delay tactic. But if Miss Minutes is just an AI, then how is she doing delaying tactics? Maybe there is a ship, or there's obviously somebody behind Miss Minutes who's helping her along. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. And of course, we got the blanket scene with Sylvie and Loki. And this was this really kind of cute high school level romance. Loki brings out a blanket, which, my first question was, isn't he part frost giant? Doesn't he not get cold? And shouldn't she also be part frost giant? So shouldn't they both not need a blanket? Okay, so they huddle together under a blanket. They're talking about stuff like, maybe we can figure it out together, what we'll do next together, all that stuff. So they're definitely building towards a relationship here, which is kind of strange since she's supposed to be just a variant of him. But maybe there's a twist coming. That would make sense. Maybe there's a twist that will give her her own place in the MCU. That would be interesting. And I think they've given us at least enough groundwork that that's possible. But, all right. Let me give you my overall thought on the episode. I think there was so many Easter eggs and so much fun that it felt like this big, exciting episode. There was running. It was like a Doctor Who episode. Everybody was running everywhere. There was twists and turns. We got to get in depth about all the different Lokis. We found out that classic Loki did the fan theory of used a illusion to attack Thanos and then made off as hid as a piece of debris, which is, again, a fan theory that's been out since that movie. Since Infinity War. So there was a lot of great stuff like that. We find out how boastful Loki, his variant, we find out that Kid Loki killed Thor and Alligator Loki ate the wrong cat, which, sorry for the cat. But yeah, there's some great stuff there. I think classic Loki's character is the one to watch the most. Not only does his story seem to be the closest to our Loki's, and that the divergence has to do with confronting Thanos, but what he did next and how he's supposed to have hidden away and he didn't get... Dan, don't question the man's game. Okay. So at the end, I think... and then we see him creating these incredible illusions of Asgard to distract Aeolus so Loki and Sylvie could actually enchant it. That was amazing. Those scenes were amazing. And him screaming out glorious purpose and laughing as he's about to die. But does he die? Does he really die? Because they just told us that he can create illusions so good that it fooled Thanos. Yes, and that's the other thing he says, Lokis survive. So this is my theory. This is my big theory going into tonight. Do I think it's 100% accurate? Am I going to pound the table? This is what they're going to do. No, I don't know. This show has proven to go left, right, and all the other directions whenever you think it's going to go someplace specific. What I think is going to happen, though, is I think we're going to discover that classic Loki is the big bad. That he's bored. It's why, even though he's created the TVA to give himself all the power, he's figured it all out, and he's been manipulating the system. I think he is he's the one behind it all, and he's creating the timelines to that will give him all the power, and he's getting the Lokis eliminated that diverge from that. So, because the Loki is probably another Loki is probably the only thing that could stop him. But I also think he's bored. That's why he's hanging out in the void. That makes the most sense to me as a writer. That we've already met the character. We've already explained how he gets away with stuff. It's already established. He survives. He made his own illusion to cover it. It just looked like he died. That seems to be, then we deal with him in the end. Now, the other two things I think that we will discover that he was being manipulated a bit by Kang. I think we will be introduced to Kang, but in the same way we were introduced to Thanos at the end of the Avengers movie. None of the main characters will meet him. It'll probably just be Ravonna. I don't know if she already knows him or not, but I think that's going to be the connection. Or, maybe Kang is a variant of Mobius. I don't know. But we'll meet a Kang at the very end to set up everything else. Kyle says Alligator Loki is the big bad. We know 100%. He saw too many of the relatives eaten in Louisiana and wanted to get even. Hey, I'm not gonna say that's not it. Could be. I wouldn't put money on it, but it could be. So, all right. So I'm thinking classic Loki's the big bad. Kang will be in the background, having manipulated things to his liking, and will hook up with Renslayer by the end of it. And this is the wild card. I think we'll learn that Sylvie isn't a Loki. I think we'll discover that Sylvie was given the powers by a Loki. Now, is it classic Loki? Is it another Loki? I think we'll find out that she was given her powers, that she is basically the Enchantress, and that she will be the Enchantress in the MCU going forward. That's why they never, called her Loki. That's why she's so against being called a Loki. And that's why, all that stuff. I think she was manipulated to be the key to bring down the classic Loki, or is somehow involved. And then the idea that Loki and Sylvie could have a relationship going forward makes more sense. I think it makes more sense than killing her. I don't think we're going to end up with a lot of different Lokis. I mean, sure, there's the multiverse, but did I see the story about Sylvie's costume? Are you talking about the zippers? Because I saw the thing about the zippers so that she could breastfeed. Yeah, I saw that. Are you making it a tie to something else? Oh, yeah, that was very cool, though. That is really nice of the costume department to be able to figure that out. But yeah, so that's my theory, is that I think Richard E. Grant's not done. I think we're going to get him as the big bad. And it seems like it would be something classic Loki would do. He's the most advanced version of our Loki. I think we'll be introduced to Kang, but only in a Thanos at the end of Avengers way, where it's teased. We're not going to get a full-on, oh, he's the big bad. And I think we'll find out something about Sylvie, that there's a good chance she isn't really a Loki variant. I think the multiverse itself will start expanding out, which is probably something that Kang wanted. And that's why he wanted to stop. He wants to stop classic Loki. So that's where I think this is going to end up. It's the one that makes the most sense to me as a writer, because it's using all the characters that have been introduced without having to really go out and explain a bunch of stuff in the final episode. I mean, there will be the maniacal explanation of, whoever the big bad is. That's always going to happen. But it won't have to be a big, long, drawn-out thing if we've already met the character and we've already seen how he's done some of his stuff. So, yeah, that's where I think it's going. I think that's going to be our finale. We will talk about, if you're right, I will buy you dinner. Because I think Renslayer is the big bad and is actually a Loki. All right. I can't see Renslayer being a Loki. She could be the big bad, but I think she is just as confused at what's going on and is just as surprised when the head fell off. And I think that's why she still has Miss Minutes looking into the files for answers. So, all right, guys, we're going to have to wrap that up here, I believe. We got another show coming up next. I don't know what it is, but it's probably the Not Nicks. Something with the Not Nicks. Black Comic Universe is next. So you definitely want to stay tuned for that. We've got a whole evening worth of shows. Also, I will be back with likely Kyle. Michelin Hess is the special guest on Black Comics Universe. So stay tuned for that. I will be back tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern with Kyle, and we will be talking about all the books hitting the comic shelves this week. So stick around for that. Just leave it on. Just leave the experience on for the rest of the day. Enjoy all the comic goodness. Thank you all. I will see you soon. Good night.